The Foghorn by Bradbury. Out there in the cold water, far from land, we waited every night for the coming of the fog. And it came, and we oiled the brass machinery and lit the fog light up in the stone tower, feeling like two birds in the grey sky. MacDunn and I sent the light touching out red, then white, then red again to eye the lonely ships. And if they did not see our light, then there was always our voice, the great deep cry of our foghorn shuddering through the rags of mist to startle the gulls away like decks of scattered cards and make the waves turn high and foam. It's a lonely life, but you're used to it now, aren't you? Asked MacDunn. Yeah, I said. You're a good talker, thank my lord. Well, it's your turn on land tomorrow, he said, smiling. Dance the ladies, drink gin. What do you think, MacDunn, when I leave you out here alone? On the mysteries of the sea? MacDunn lit his pipe. It was 7:15 of a cold November evening, the heat on in the high throat of the tower. There wasn't a town for 100 miles down the coast, just a road, which came lonely through the dead country to the sea, with few cars on it, a stretch of 2 miles of cold water out to our rock. And rare, said MacDunn thoughtfully. You know, the ocean was the biggest damn snowflake ever. Rolls and swells 1,000 shapes and colours, no two alike. Strange. One night, years ago, I was here alone when all of the fish of the sea surfaced out there. Something made them swim in and lie in the bay, sort of trembling, staring up at the tower light, going red, white across them so I could see their funny eyes. It turned cold. They were like a big peacock's tail moving out there until midnight. Then, without so much as a sound, they just slipped away. The million of them, gone. I kind of think, maybe, in some sort of way, they came all these miles to worship. Strange, but I think how the tower must look to them standing 70 feet above the water. This godlike light flashing out from it and the tower declaring itself with a monster voice. They never came back, those fish. But don't you think for a while they thought they were in the presence? I shivered. I looked out at the long grey lawn of the sea stretching away into nothing and nowhere. Oh, the sea's full. MacDunn puffed his pipe, nervously, blinking. He had been nervous all day. He hadn't said why. For all our engines and so-called submarines, it'll be 10,000 centuries before we set foot on the real bottom of the sunken lands. The fairy kingdom's there, and there we will know real terror. Think of it. It's still the year 300,000 before Christ down under there. While we've paraded around with trumpets, lopped off each other's countries and heads, they have been living beneath the sea 12 miles deep and cold, in a time as old as the beard on a comet. It's an old world. Come on, I've got something special I've been saving up to tell you. We ascended the 80 steps, talking and taking our time. At the top, MacDunn switched off the room lights so there'd be no reflection in the plate glass. The great eye of the light was humming, turning easily in its oiled socket, the foghorn blowing steadily, once every 15 seconds. Sounds like an animal, doesn't it? MacDunn nodded to himself. A big, lonely animal crying in the night. Sitting here on the edge of 10 million years, calling out to the deeps. I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. And the deeps answer. Yes, they do. You've been in now for 3 months, Johnny, so I better prepare you. About this time of year, he said, studying the murk and fog, something comes to visit this lighthouse. The swarms of fish, like you said. No, this is something else. I've put off telling you because you might think I'm daft, but tonight's the latest I can put it off, for if my calendar's marked right from last year, tonight's the night it comes. I won't go into detail. You'll have to see it for yourself. Just sit down, there. If you want, tomorrow, you can pack your duffel and take the motorboat into land and get your car parked there at the dinghy pier on the Cape. Drive on back to some little inland town and keep your lights burning nights. I won't question you, I won't blame you. It's happened 3 years now. This is the only time anyone's been here with me to verify it. So you're going to wait. And you're going to watch. Half an hour passed with only a few whispers between us. When we grew tired waiting, MacDonald began describing some of his ideas to me. He had some theories about the foghorn itself. One day, many years ago, a man walked along and stood in the sound of the ocean on a cold, sunless shore, and he said, "You know what? We need a voice to call across the water to warn ships. I'll make one. I'll make a voice that is like an empty bed beside you all night long, like an empty house when you open the door, like the trees in autumn with no leaves. A sound like the birds flying south crying, a sound like November wind and the sea on the hard, cold shore. I'll make a sound that's so alone no one can miss it, that whoever hears it will weep in their souls, and to all who hear it in the distant towns. I'll make me a sound and an apparatus, and they'll call it a foghorn, and whoever hears it will know the sadness of eternity and the briefness of life." The foghorn blew. "I made up that story," said MacDonald quietly. "Made it up to try to explain why this thing keeps coming back to the lighthouse every year. The foghorn calls, I think. It comes, but—" I said. "Shh," said MacDonald. "There." He nodded out to the deeps. Something was swimming towards the lighthouse tower. It was a cold night. As I said, the high tower was cold, the light coming and going, and the foghorn calling and calling through the raveling mist. You couldn't see far, and you couldn't see plain, but there was the deep sea moving on its way about the night earth, flat and quiet, the colour of grey mud. And here were the two of us, alone in the high tower, and there, far out, at first, was a ripple, followed by a wave, a rising, a bubble, some froth. Then from the surface of the cold sea came a head, a large head, dark-coloured, immense eyes, and then a neck, and then not a body, but more neck, and more. The head rose a full 40 feet above the water on a slender and beautiful neck, and only then did the body, like a little island of black coral and shells and crayfish, drip up from the subterranean. There was a flicker of tail, in all from head to tip of tail. I estimated the monster at 90 or 100 feet. I don't know what I said. I know I said something. "Steady, boy, steady," whispered MacDonald. It's impossible." I said, "No, Johnny, it's not. We're impossible. It's like it always was 10 million years ago. It hasn't changed. It's us and the land that have changed, that have become impossible. Us." It swam slowly and with a great majesty out in the icy waters far away. The fog came and went about it, momentarily erasing its shape. One of the monster eyes caught and held and flashed back our immense light, red, white, like a disc held high and sending a message in primeval code. It was as silent as the fog through which it swam. "It's a dinosaur of some sort." I crouched down, holding to the No, only hid away in the deeps. Deep down, the deepest deeps. Isn't that a word now, Johnny? A real word. It says so much. The deeps. There's all the coldness and darkness and deepness in the world in a word like that. What do we do? Do? We got our job. We can't leave. Besides, we're safer here than in any boat trying to get to land. That thing's as big as a destroyer and almost as swift. But here, why does it come here? The next moment, I had my answer. The foghorn blew, and the monster answered. A cry came across a million years of water and mist, a cry so anguished and alone it shuddered in my head and my body. The monster cried out at the tower. The foghorn blew. The monster roared again. The foghorn blew. The monster opened its great toothed mouth, and the sound that came from it was the sound of the foghorn itself, lonely and vast and far away. The sound of isolation A viewless sea, a cold night, apartness. That was the sound. Now, whispered MacDunn. Now do you know why it comes here? I nodded. All year long, Johnny. That poor monster there lying far out, 1,000 miles at sea, 20 miles deep maybe, biding its time. Perhaps 1,000,000 years old, this one creature. Think of it, waiting 1,000,000 years. Could you wait that long? Maybe it's the last of its kind. I sort of think that's true. Anyway, here come men on land and build this lighthouse 5 years ago. And set up their foghorn and sound it out towards the place where you bury yourself in sleep and see memories of a world where there were thousands like you, but now you're alone. All alone in a world that's not made for you. A world where you have to hide. But the sound of the foghorn comes and goes, and you stir from the muddy bottom of the deeps, and your eyes open like the lenses of 2-foot cameras, and you move slow, slow, for you have the ocean sea on your shoulders, heavy. But that foghorn comes through 1,000 miles of water, faint and familiar, and the furnace in your belly stokes up, and you begin to rise, slow, slow. You feed yourself on minnows, on rivers of jellyfish, and you rise slow through the autumn months, through September when the fog started, through October with more fog and the horns still calling you on. And then, late in November, after pressurizing yourself day by day, a few feet higher every hour, you are near the surface and you are still alive. You've got to go slow. If you surfaced all at once, you'd explode. So it takes you all of 3 months to surface and then a number of days to swim through the cold waters to the lighthouse. And there you are, out there in the night, Johnny. The biggest damn monster in creation. And here's the lighthouse calling to you, with a long neck like your neck sticking way up out of the water, and a body like your body. And most of all, most important of all, a voice like your voice. Do you understand now, Johnny? Do you understand? The foghorn blew. The monster answered. I saw it all. I knew it all. The 1,000,000 years of waiting alone for someone to come back who never came back. The 1,000,000 years of isolation at the bottom of the sea. The insanity of time there, while the skies cleared of reptile birds, the swamps fried on the continental lands. The sloths and saber-tooths had their day and sank in tar pits, and men ran like ants upon the hills. The foghorn blew. Last year, said MacDunn, that creature swam round and round all night, not coming too near, puzzled, I'd say, afraid, maybe, a bit angry after coming all this way. But the next day, unexpectedly, the fog lifted. The sun came out fresh, the sky was as blue as a painting, and the monster swam off away from the heat and the silence and didn't come back. I suppose it's been brooding on it for a year now, thinking it over every which way. The monster was only 100 yards off now, it and the foghorn crying at each other. As the lights hit them, the monster's eyes were fire and ice. Fire and ice. That's life for you, said MacDunn. Someone always waiting for someone who never comes home. Always someone loving something more than that thing loves them. After a while, you want to destroy whatever that thing is, so it can't hurt you anymore. The monster was rushing at the lighthouse. The foghorn blew. Let's see what happens, said MacDunn. He switched the foghorn off. The ensuing minute of silence was so intense that we could hear our hearts pounding in the glassed area of the tower, could hear the slow, greased turn of the light. The monster stopped, froze. Its great lantern eyes blinked, its mouth gaped, and gave a sort of rumble like a volcano. It twitched its head this way and that, as if to seek the sounds now dwindled off in the fog. It peered at the lighthouse, it rumbled again, and then its eyes caught fire. It reared up, threshed the water, and rushed at the tower, eyes filled with angry torment. "MacDunn!" I cried. "The horn!" MacDunn fumbled with the switch. But even as he switched it on, the monster was rearing up. I had a glimpse of its gigantic paws, fish skin glittering in webs between the finger-like projections, clawing at the tower. The huge eye on the right side of its anguished head glittered before me like a cauldron into which I might drop, screaming. The tower shook. The foghorn cried. The monster cried. It seized the tower and gnashed at the glass, which shattered in upon us. MacDunn seized my arm. Downstairs. The tower rocked, trembled, and started to give. The foghorn and the monster roared. We stumbled and half fell down the stairs until we reached the bottom as the tower buckled down towards us. We ducked under the stairs in the small stone cellar. There were 1,000 concussions as the rocks rained down. The foghorn stopped abruptly. The monster crashed upon the tower. The tower fell. We knelt together, MacDunn and I, holding tight as our world exploded. Then it was over, and there was nothing but darkness and the wash of the sea on the raw stones. That, and the other sound. Listen, said MacDunn quietly. Listen. We waited a moment, and then I began to hear it. First a great vacuum sucking of air, and then the lament, the bewilderment, the loneliness of the great monster folded over upon us, above us, so that the sickening reek of its body filled the air, a stone's thickness away from our cellar. The monster gasped and cried. The tower was gone. The light was gone. The thing that had called it across 1,000,000 years was gone. And the monster was opening its mouth and sending out great sounds, the sounds of a foghorn again and again. And ships far at sea, not finding our light, not seeing anything but passing and hearing late that night, must have thought, there it is, the lonely sound, the lonesome bay horn. All's well. We've rounded the cape. And so it went for the rest of that night. The sun was hot and yellow the next afternoon when the rescuers came to dig us from our stoned under cellar. It fell apart is all, said MacDunn gravely. We had a few bad knocks from the waves and it just crumbled. He pinched my arm. There was nothing to see. The ocean was calm, the sky blue. The only thing was a great algaic stink from the green matter that covered the fallen tower stones and the shore rocks. Flies buzzed about it. The ocean washed empty on the shore. The next year they built a new lighthouse, but by that time I had a job in the little town and a wife and a good small warm house that glowed yellow on autumn nights, the doors locked, the chimney puffing smoke. As for MacDunn, he was master of the new lighthouse, built to his own specifications out of steel-reinforced concrete. Just in case, he said. The new lighthouse was ready in November. I drove down alone one evening late, parked my car, and looked across the grey waters and listened to the new horn sounding once, twice, 3, 4 times a minute, far out there by itself. The monster? It never came back. It's gone away, said MacDunn. It's gone back to the deeps. It's learned you can't love anything too much in this world. It's gone into the deepest deeps to wait another 1,000,000 years. The poor waiting and waiting. I sat in my car listening. I couldn't see the lighthouse or the light standing out in Lonesome Bay. I could only hear the horn. The horn. The horn. It sounded like the monster calling. I sat there, wishing there was something I could say. And that's our story, folks. Before we sign off for the night, as a genuinely lovely piece of happenstance, I actually discovered a truly wonderful quote, which I'm building up far too much, but just in case I can't lay my hand immediately on it, which speaks very strongly to this story. It's from On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong, and it's this. To be a monster is to be a hybrid signal, a lighthouse, both shelter and warning at once. I kind of like that. Hope you had fun. Have a good night, and we will see you next week.